Hello and welcome to Psychgeist, where we talk about the psychology of the era, the science of games. I am your host, Dr. Rachel Kowert, and today we're talking about toxicity of our city, of games. Toxicity of games. With the advent of digital games has come the advent of gamer cultures and identities. Being a gamer is a social category that was first ascribed to the group of misfits who took part in the strange activity of video gaming in arcades in the late 1970s. As part of this sociocultural niche, gamer was established as a term to define and unite this group who loved digital games, overpriced popcorn, and the comfort of a dimly lit arcade. Since then, the term gamer has grown to represent not only players, but differentiate gamers as their own subcultural movement, because not all players are gamers, but all gamers are players. Today, gamer is a term that has become widely integrated into personal, social, and cultural identities. We express our gamerdom with our choice of clothing, the references we make, how we view ourselves and others, and our place in the world, and our decor. Over time, however, gamer cultures have grown into what is largely discussed as toxic gamer cultures, and come to be more associated with exclusion than inclusion if you don't fit a certain mold. As discussed by Megan Condis, quote, "As events like the 2014 harassment campaign, #Gamergate, aptly demonstrated, to some members of the gaming community, the increased visibility of people of color, women, and LGBTQ people in gaming circles is seen less as an expansion and more as a hostile takeover." Similarly, Brianna Wu states, "Though the gaming world is huge and diverse and full of smart and wonderful players, it's also thronged by misogynists and racists who feel free to advocate harm against anyone who's not like them. These communities of exclusion and hostility have come to be housed under the umbrella of toxic gamer cultures, and is a phenomenon that's quite well known in gaming communities. At its root, toxic gamer cultures refers to the prevalence of deviant behaviors within games. We're going to get to those in a minute. But also readily dismissing one's responsibility for them under the shared idea that you're just part of an anonymous toxic gamer collective identity. The development of toxicity in gamer cultures is concerning for a lot of reasons, but first and foremost because games are designed to be fun, playful activities for everyone. But the emergence of toxic behavior and toxic gamer cultures, fueled by verbal and behavioral abuse within these communities, such as harassment, griefing, doxing, hate rating, swatting, has created spaces that are the opposite of welcoming, inclusive spaces. Research has found that these behaviors in online gaming spaces, however brief, can cause psychological harm to the intended victim and any silent viewers or third-party onlookers who might see it. In fact, in 2019, the ADL found that 1 in 10 game players reported having depressive or suicidal thoughts as a result of harassment in online multiplayer games, and nearly 1 in 10, 8%, had to take steps to reduce the threat to their physical safety. A 2020 study found that 80% of players said they believe the average gamer makes prejudiced comments while playing online, suggesting that toxic gamer cultures have permeated gaming environments and communities at least 80%. So let's take a step back and break it all down. What is toxic behavior? Despite its prevalence, toxic behavior as a subject of academic study is a confusing space, with different researchers using different criteria to describe the same things. This is likely due to the fact that it's a relatively new field of study. Existing studies are few and far between, and nearly all of them have been atheoretical due to the lack of empirical basis upon which to build any theories. Some research treat any deceptive action as toxic, while deception is not always required by other researchers. Other negative behaviors with perceived hostile intent are sometimes grouped into trolling, while other researchers treat them as a separate phenomena. After reading the research that's out there and trying my best to organize it, this is what I have gathered. All deviant behavior that takes place online propaganda, fake news, harassment, stalking, doxing, can be placed under an umbrella of dark participation, which I wish I could take credit for because that is such a good way to frame it, but that comes from Professor Quant at the University of Minster. Out of this umbrella, we get different kinds of toxicity. There are significant cultural differences in determining what constitutes toxic behavior. There is such a variety of online behaviors that take place. What is considered toxic in one situation might not be in another. For example, in some circles, contrary play, playing in ways the game doesn't intend you to play, may or may not be considered toxic. For example, speedruns are generally not considered toxic. However, in other cases, Contrary play can be seen as exploitative. Contrary play is a good example because it's not a behavior that is necessarily targeted to disrupt the play of others, as trolling implies, but it's still considered toxic. So toxicity is the outcome. Trolling is an intent. In internet slang, a troll is a person who sows discord on the internet with the deliberate intent of eliciting an emotional response or otherwise disrupting on-topic discussions and actions among players. So things like trash talking, griefing, doxing, these behaviors are all done with the intent of causing annoyance, distress, or harm to another player. All of these behaviors would be considered trolling. For the purposes of this video, we are talking about the big picture, toxic behaviors. Trolling behaviors being one subcategory of them. So what kind of toxic behaviors do we need to worry about in online games? There are actually quite a few variants. I debated whether or not to get into these details, but I think a quick overview is important to understand exactly what kind of behaviors are occurring so we can establish a shared language. When I started delving into the research literature, I quickly realized that there's not one universal list of toxic behaviors in online games. There have been several attempts to catalog different types of toxicity and trolling, like this one from Cook, which is quite good, and there are many other ones out there, but they don't truly encapsulate the full range of behaviors. So drawing from them, I made my best attempt to create a comprehensive list. If I missed something, please let me know by leaving a comment below. Broadly speaking, we can think of toxic behavior in games on a spectrum from verbal to behavioral. We can also think of them on a spectrum from transient to strategic. Please note this list is not organized in terms of the severity of the behaviors, but strictly on these continuums. So let's take a look at these behaviors starting at the top. First, there's trash talking, putting down or making fun of others. Misinformation, repeating game unrelated chat. Spamming, repeatedly engaging in an action such as sending the same verbal message or using the same in-game move, often to the consternation of others. Griefing, irritating and or harassing other players by using the game in unintended ways. Sexual harassment, insults or comments based on gender, including threats, the criticism of women and their interests, and stalking. Hate speech, insults based on religion, ethnicity, nationality, or other personal information. Threats of violence, threats of physical abuse, vandalism, arson, sabotage, possession, or use of weapons or other dangerous act. Flaming, presenting emotionally fueled or contrary statements with an instrumental purpose. Inappropriate role-playing, pretending you are a different person to obtain a specific reaction or not abiding by role-playing norms of the game and or community. Contrary play, playing the game outside of what is intended by most players. Inhibiting team, inhibiting your own team from being successful in winning. Aiding the enemy, behaving in a way that strategically aids the opposing team. In-game cheating, using methods to create advantage beyond normal gameplay in order to make the game easier for oneself. Hate raiding, purposefully infiltrating the gaming space of another with the intention of spreading hate and harassment. Doxing, publicly sharing and or publishing another player's identifying information. Swatting, prank calling emergency services in an attempt to dispatch armed police officers to a particular address. So how prevalent are these behaviors in gaming spaces? A 2019 report from the ADL reported that 74% of adults who play online multiplayer games in the US experience some form of harassment while online. A 2020 study found that over half of their surveyed players, 53%, said they experienced harassment based on their race, ethnicity, religion, ability, gender, or sexual orientation. And 65% had experienced some form of severe harassment, including physical threats, stalking, or sustained harassment. It also found that nearly 1 in 3, 29% of players have been doxxed, which is where your personal identifiable information is posted publicly online. So taken together, we can conclude that more than half of players of online games have experienced some form of harassment. So yeah, it's a problem, a big one. This doesn't even take into consideration any potential butterfly effects of those witnessing these kinds of behaviors. So why does trolling happen and what can we do about it? In a 2018 study, Cook and colleagues interviewed perpetrators of toxic behavior to uncover their motivations for these kinds of in-game actions. According to the results, and generally speaking, what we call toxic behavior in games can be broken down into 3 broad categories: attack, sensation-seeking, and interaction-seeking, though the researchers note that these elements are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Attack-focused trolling is defined as a direct attack on another player's enjoyment of the game or gameplay. This was the most commonly seen example. Sensation seeking paints a more asocial picture of trolling. It was neither inherently good nor bad, but simply a barrier that leads to enjoyable consequences, like creating drama. Interaction seeking emphasizes trolling as an unorthodox method of communication designed to make players get involved in both the conversation and the game. This goes on that idea that no attention is bad attention. Another reason toxic behaviors happen is due to the unique characteristics of the gaming space. The online disinhibition effect, for example, which is the idea that you can't see me and you don't know me. This combination of anonymity and invisibility is generally thought as one of the primary driving forces of toxic behavior. Supporting this idea, research has found that when anonymity was removed from social media sites, it reduced the amount of trolling. Then there are also community factors, because once the norms of any particular culture have been established, they strongly impact the members within it. The social identity model of de-individuation effects, the SIDE model, suggests that de-individuation or depersonalization of group members, which we often find in gaming communities partly because of the anonymity provided to them via the online disinhibition effect, can emphasize presumed similarities between members in a group and encourage behavior consistent with group norms. That is, the more anonymous a person is, the more de-individuated they are, there's a barrier between who they are and their actions on the internet, the more likely they are to adhere to group norms. For example, research has found that in-group norms that favor derogatory behaviors towards an outgroup predicts the likelihood of a member of that group exhibiting those behaviors. In this case, it was an opposing sports team, but it could very easily be applied to the gamer-non-gamer categorization or any in-group, out-group situation. So going back to the quotes at the start of this video, if you see someone as part of the out-group and you see yourself as part of the in-group, and that in-group norm is toxic behavior towards anyone in the out-group, the SIDE model would suggest that you're more likely to engage in that kind of behavior. And we know from research on the effects of the online disinhibition effect, this idea of anonymity and invisibility creates an ideal space for people to push boundaries and do so with a sense of very little repercussion. So the online disinhibition effect makes these spaces more open for toxic behavior to happen, but it seems the SIDE effects, the SIDE effects, fuel a perpetuating cycle. There are a few other lines of research worth noting here. There's a whole range of personality and social factors that may also be at play. For example, research from the University of Münster found that people who harass other players score higher on measures of Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and gamer identification measures. Going back to that SIDE model idea. There's also the idea that games are socialized to be boys' toys, and toxicity stems from the idea that games are being infiltrated by not boys. And this creates a heightened tension, and harassment has developed as a means to make everyone leave their space, so to say. So how do we combat it? It's an uphill battle, but it's not impossible. Once the norms of any particular culture have formed, they have a strong impact on the way members act within it. But we do know that toxic behavior is largely driven and sustained by a lack of accountability. To truly stop this cycle, we need change from the top down and the bottom up. So from the top down, here are 3 steps that the video game industry could take today to help reduce toxic behavior. Number 1, make the reporting tools better. According to the ADL, 62% of players think companies should do more to make online games safer and more inclusive. Part of this is accountability with the reporting systems. Anecdotally, people have complained about reporting systems for years. And there are a lot of reasons for this, one of which being a lot of times it doesn't seem like the reports do anything. This year I spoke at a summer camp with preteen girls who like to play Overwatch. They were awesome. But when Q&A came, every question was about toxic gamer cultures. And the first piece of advice that I gave, that I always give when I talk with parents and children, is use the reporting tools. And every single one of them rolled their eyes and said, why would I do that? Reporting tools don't do anything. This sentiment might be why, at least partially, the ADL study also found only 12% of people who experience harassment reported through in-game reporting tools, which is unfortunate because research has found that getting reported is a deterrent for toxic behavior. So this means either that reporting systems are inefficient and they aren't doing anything, or they are working effectively, but players don't believe they are, so they're not using them. Either way, we have a problem because toxic players feel like they can get away with their bad behavior and persist doing it, and good players lose faith in reporting tools and stop using them. Reporting tools are an important way to catalog what is happening in any particular gaming community, but they are not effective if change doesn't happen when reporting takes place. There needs to be more accountability from game developers, the publishers, and the hosting services to ensure gaming spaces are accessible and safe for everyone. Number 2, stronger community guidelines. A GDC talk from Daniel Kelly of the ADL found that the League of Legends guidelines are the same as Facebook's guidelines were in 2002, and we all know how that worked out. Some practical advice here: everyone needs to read Victoria Tran's treatise on creating inclusive communities. You can also check out the Detox project that was done in collaboration with Games for Change. It is a game that helps foster a better understanding of toxicity and how it can impact gaming communities. It was created to raise awareness for issues about toxicity in games and exploring potential solutions. And read Victoria Tran stuff. Like, follow her now and read all her things. Number 3, collaboration between industry and researchers. There is a lot of research going on in the industry. Proprietary information that us as researchers never see. We need more transparency between our concerted efforts to understand toxicity and how to effectively address it. Then there's the bottom up. We also have to do our part. We have a responsibility to call out toxic behavior when we see it in our gaming spaces. Tanya DePass says, we need to be the accomplice. A study conducted this year found that 20% of gamers said they stand up to harassment when they see it. 1 in 5. And we know that 3 in 4 are experiencing harassment, so something missing there. Another study found that only 18% of people said prejudice was confronted in online games, even though 76% of players felt prejudice should be confronted in online games. The researchers noted that this kind of behavior is primarily either ignored or met with similar comments. But they also found that the more normative confrontation of prejudice was reported to be, the more likely people were to report confronting prejudice. This corroborates the work from the University of Münster that has found the best way to combat toxicity is to have someone of a similar social status confront the offender, be the accomplice. Be the active ally. See something, say something. All of these things. So what's the take-home message here? Toxic behavior in games is a real problem, with over half of players saying they've experienced harassment because of their race, ethnicity, religion, ability, gender, or sexual orientation. We combat it by demanding that those on top, whether it's game companies, third-party chat servers, game community managers, moderators, whoever it might be, that they start enlisting tangible repercussions for this kind of behavior, that they start engaging with the wider research community to find solutions, and that we start becoming a more active ally. We become the accomplice. We become the change we want to see in the gaming world. If you like this video and you want to see more, please hit like and subscribe. And until next time, be excellent to each other and always cite your sources.